used it to build your own comfortable life, all while convincing her she was nothing, that no one wanted her, that her own grandfather had abandoned her. Kioma's face was blotchy now, streaked with angry tears. Her voice rose in sharp defense. I gave her a place to live. That should have been enough. She should be grateful. That was when Nia stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't break. Grateful, she said. You want me to be grateful that you fed me scraps while you lived in luxury, paid for with my money? You want me to be grateful that you lied to me about my grandfather, made me believe I was alone in the world? You want me to be grateful that the moment I turned 18, you threw me away to survive on the streets? The room fell silent. Before Kioma could form a response, Thomas Wright, Malcolm's attorney, quietly stepped aside and made a phone call. 15 minutes later, police officers arrived. The evidence was impossible to deny. Bank records, forged documents, years of transactions, statements from neighbors who remembered the quiet little girl they almost never saw. A child hidden in plain sight. Kioma Johnson was arrested on charges of embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. As officers led her out in handcuffs, her two children came down the staircase, drawn by the noise. They were teenagers now, 15 and 17. Confusion and fear filled their faces as they watched their mother taken away. They had grown up comfortable, private schools, new clothes, full plates. They had no idea their life was built on stolen money, and their cousins suffering. Malcolm's heart was heavy, but his conscience was clear. He made immediate arrangements for the two children to stay with their maternal aunt. They were innocent, victims of their mother's choices. He would make sure they were cared for. But Nia was his priority now. The trial moved quickly. The evidence left no room for doubt. Financial analysts laid out the paper trail in brutal clarity. Bank employees testified how Kioma had positioned herself as guardian, falsely claiming Nia had special needs and couldn't manage her finances. Neighbors described a child rarely seen, always kept inside. Mrs. Adoni took the stand and spoke about Nia's condition when she arrived at the shelter. Malnourished, traumatized, with no money, no documents, no support. And then, Nia testified, she sat in that courtroom with quiet strength, her back straight, her voice steady. She spoke of years spent isolated, of minimal care, of being told her grandfather didn't want her, of believing she was unwanted and disposable. She described the day she turned 18. No celebration, no goodbye. Just a door closing behind her. She told the court how she slept in parks, hid in libraries during the day, and survived on hope until she finally found Mercy House shelter. By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. And for the first time in her life, Nia wasn't invisible anymore. The jury didn't need long. Less than 3 hours after deliberations began, the verdict was read. Guilty on every count. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the sentence. Kioma Johnson was ordered to serve 12 years in federal prison and to repay every dollar she had stolen, $2 million plus interest and damages. Her assets were seized immediately. The house, the cars, every luxury purchased with stolen money was stripped away. The recovered funds were placed into a newly created trust for Nia, this time protected by strict oversight, legal safeguards, and people whose only job was to protect her future. Justice at last had a shape. 6 months later, Nia's life looked nothing like it once had. She enrolled at Northwestern University, choosing to study social work with a focus on young people aging out of foster care. She wanted to become the advocate she never had, to stand beside those the system too often forgets. Nia moved in with Malcolm, and together they began building the relationship that had been stolen from them for 18 years. Slowly, carefully, with patience and honesty. Malcolm taught her about business, about resilience, about the family history she had been denied. He introduced her to distant relatives who welcomed her without hesitation. For the first time, Nia discovered she had cousins, aunts, uncles, a living family tree that had been waiting for her all along. She learned about her mother not through silence, but through stories, through photo albums, through saved letters and old videos. Thandi became real, not just a name or a single photograph, but a presence she could finally feel. And Malcolm learned about Nia, her sharp intelligence, her deep compassion, her unexpected sense of humor. She loved old movies, spicy food, and had a natural talent for drawing. She studied hard, but she was also learning something just as important: how to rest, how to trust, how to believe she didn't have to earn food, safety, or love. One Saturday morning, Nia asked Malcolm to drive her somewhere. She guided him back to the south side, back to Mercy House Shelter. Mrs. Adoni greeted them with a radiant smile and tight embraces. Nia had been volunteering there every weekend, helping young women navigate resources, education options, and legal support. She understood their fear because she had lived it. But this day was different. Together, Nia and Malcolm had created a scholarship fund, the Thandi Sterling Second Chance Scholarship. It would cover tuition, books, housing, and support services for young women facing homelessness or aging out of foster care. Not just money, but stability. In Mrs. Adoni's office, 3 young women stood nervously as Nia handed them their award letters. Malcolm watched quietly as his granddaughter comforted them, shared her story, and gave them something they desperately needed: hope. In that moment, he saw his daughter reflected in Nia. This was who Thandi would have been: someone who turned pain into purpose. After the presentation, Malcolm and Nia returned to the car and drove to the cemetery, toward a place where grief had once lived alone, but where healing was finally beginning to grow. They stood quietly at Thandi's grave. The headstone was simple, elegant, just as she had been. Malcolm had visited this place countless times over the years, always alone, always carrying the weight of grief and regret. But today was different. Today, he wasn't standing there as a broken father haunted by failure. Today, he had brought his granddaughter home. "I found her, baby girl," Malcolm whispered, kneeling as he placed fresh flowers at the base of the stone. "Our Nia. She's everything you would have hoped for: strong, kind, brilliant. She survived things no child ever should, and she did it with grace." Nia stepped forward and laid her own flowers beside his. From her bag, she pulled out a photograph, the first picture ever taken of her and Malcolm together, snapped during her university orientation. "Hi, Mom," she whispered softly. "I finally met Grandpa. I finally found my way home. I wish you were here, but I feel you with me. I feel you in every kind thing he does, every story he tells about you. I promise, I'll make you proud." The wind stirred gently, as if carrying her words somewhere sacred. That evening, back at the penthouse, Nia sat at Malcolm's desk working on an essay for class. The assignment was simple: write about a transformative experience. She had been writing for over an hour, the words flowing freely now that her story finally made sense. Malcolm appeared quietly, setting down a cup of tea, just the way she liked it, with honey and lemon. He kissed the top of her head the way his own father once had, the way he should have been doing for the past 18 years. "Don't stay up too late," he said gently. "You have a study group in the morning." "I won't," Nia smiled up at him. "Good night, Grandpa." "Good night, sweetheart." Malcolm walked to his room, his heart fuller than it had been in decades. He had lost time. He had made mistakes. But life had given him something rare and precious: a second chance. A chance to be present. A chance to make things right. A chance to watch Nia become the remarkable woman she was already becoming. A chance to turn failure into redemption. In her essay, Nia wrote about survival, about resilience, about the day everything changed, the moment a stranger walked into a shelter kitchen and revealed he was her grandfather. She wrote about learning she hadn't been forgotten, that she hadn't been abandoned, that someone had been fighting for her all along, even without knowing it. She wrote about justice finally catching up with cruelty. But most of all, she wrote about hope, about discovering that your worth isn't defined by how others treat you, but by who you choose to become, despite it. She ended the essay with a single line, one that would later become her personal motto: "The money was never what mattered. It was being seen, being loved, and being given the chance to become who I was meant to be. Nia saved the document and gently closed her laptop. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago shimmered like a sky turned upside down, thousands of lights glowing against the night. Somewhere out there were other young women just like Nia, sleeping in shelters, hiding their pain, believing quietly and painfully that they were alone. But they weren't alone. And Nia made a promise to herself that night. She would make sure they never felt that way again. She would use her story, her education, and every resource she now had to become the voice she once needed. She would advocate, she would fight, she would refuse to let others remain invisible the way she had been. Because Nia had learned something powerful. Suffering can either break you or shape you into something stronger. Isolation can destroy you or teach you the value of connection. Being knocked down can keep you there or show you how to rise with greater purpose. Nia chose to rise. She chose to turn pain into purpose, trauma into testimony, survival into service. In doing so, she honored the mother she never truly knew, the grandfather who found her just in time, and the countless others who never got that chance. The scholarship fund grew. More young women received second chances. More lives were changed. And 72 floors above the city, a grandfather and granddaughter slowly built the bond they had been denied. One conversation, one shared meal, one precious moment at a time. Nia's story reminds us that justice isn't only about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about reclaiming what was stolen and building something better in its place. Kioma took 18 years from Nia's life, but she couldn't take her spirit, she couldn't take her intelligence, and she couldn't take her capacity for grace. If this story moved you, tap the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us what you would have done if you were in Malcolm's place. And don't forget to subscribe, because we bring you real stories of real people overcoming impossible odds. Sometimes the family meant to protect you becomes your greatest enemy. But sometimes, when you least expect it, family finds you again. And that's when healing begins. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember,